Hey everyone, it is Sean and we are back with our Push Talk, Daily Push Talk. Today is October 11th and we have a very special guest in with us today, Miss Ada Zane. How are you, Miss Ada?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm super excited. So we literally just recently met
yes,
a couple of minutes ago.
Absolutely.
But it's funny because I love doing this podcast because every single time we do it, it's like an opportunity for me to learn something new.
Yes.
And you have a company called Smart Pathways.
Correct.
And you guys deal with immigration. Tell us more about Smart Pathways.
So it's a very unique company. It's sort of birthed as one of the first in the country to do it. So just to take you back, give it a little quick backstory, 2 or 3 minute backstory. So about 6 years ago, my husband came to me. His best friend owns a cleaning company for the city of Atlanta. Mm-hmm. He has a lot of documented, undocumented workers, but his documented workers were having a hard time getting their paperwork done, mainly because they work janitorial wages and there's a language barrier. Right. So they asked me if I could help, but I didn't know anything about immigration outside of the definition, no knowledge of it. I'm not an immigrant, no background in immigration. So the first thing, that you want to do is, okay, well, let me see if I can find a book because I don't know what I'm doing. And that's where sort of the journey began. I couldn't find one. And that didn't make any sense to me. And I'm like, there's millions of immigrants that live in the country, but there's not even a single book to simplify the process for me. So upon more research, I came across the term licensed immigration consultant, and that you can get a professional license through the Secretary of State. So I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting. Maybe they have a training program that'll help me. So I called them and I asked, well, how do I get trained? They said their exact answer to me was, you're on your own. And with the type of rules, that are associated with that license, I could get myself locked up, or sued, or even worse, someone could get deported if I don't know what I'm doing. So upon that, what I began to do over the past 5-6 years was create a curriculum, because you have this opportunity. I saw this sort of barren land, which is the immigration industry, and it's completely underdeveloped because there's not even a book to teach you even what immigration is. This was during the time Trump was running for office, and one of the first things that he said on his announcements about immigration is that they're coming here to rape and steal our jobs. Now, where do we go to defute that type of information? Because immigration really isn't taught in schools. I had no knowledge of immigration. So with that being said, I created a curriculum for immigration consultants, licensed consultant, which covers every state in the United States, but I also created training manuals so that it can simplify the process for green card renewals, green cards, U.S. citizenship. But more importantly, I created a software that simplifies the immigration application process, similar to TurboTax. So now that we can develop immigration consultant firms branded by trained consultants in these communities, so that those that are like the Hispanic community that were, janitors, now they can walk in and they can afford it, or they can walk in and ask questions. Simple questions for them is, how do I get a tag? I'm having issues at my school, or I'm undocumented and I'm being harassed. I can't go to the police. So this opened up a bigger door so that we can actually, and really sort of during this conversation, I want you to put yourself in the mind that you're in a country, you don't speak the language, you have to learn how to be here, you have to learn the system. So I want you to sort of keep that in mind as we go through this, this process, because I had to do it myself. So, as I began to develop, and I got to a point where I'm like, let me just go out and talk with some immigrants to find out, where their needs are. So I hosted a seminar. I had 150 seats. Within 7 days, every seat was taken. So at the time of the seminar, I had immigrants there, Americans there, but I also had immigration consultants. I had immigration officers there as well. So one of the questions that I asked the immigration consultants, because they're like, yeah, I've had a license for 5 years, and sort of talking, I've helped immigrants do et cetera, X, Y, and Z. And I said, well, how did you learn how to do it? I already knew the answer. They all said the same thing, Google. And I was like, wow. And they said, we never even thought of why there's no curriculum, no place to teach us. So they were there, but the immigrants that were there, sharing some of the stories of how they got here. That's probably one of the most important parts, because some are here on asylum, and some of course, across the border. They came here undocumented, and the stories came from Iran, from Colombia, from the Philippines, and a lot of them, immigration applications means freedom. It means I don't have to be deported back home and killed. It's that serious for them. So when we think as Americans, when we think of immigration application, we're thinking of some documents that we typically fill out, like, okay, I fill out this form. If it gets rejected, I'm going to do it again. That's not the case all the time for immigrants. If applications are denied, it's a balance, and it's up to the immigration officers to apply mercy or not. Is that to their discretion? And a lot of times these immigrants, from the town halls that I've been having, what they're saying is there's no place for us to go. This place has it, this place has it, but really what we're dependent on is my cousin's boyfriend's girlfriend's uncle. I can't use his information. He was deported. Let's start over again. So what we're asking for, and even with these town halls that I'm having, it's getting politicians to hear the story. And I'm asking them the questions. What's your immigration platform? I don't have one. I said, that's unfortunate, because they're human and they vote.
Right.
And they're here and they're a part of our community. And if anyone American actually takes the time, and everybody knows an immigrant, ask them their story. I've heard stories from Nigeria, not Nigeria, some other country in Africa, but where one lady had to hop over hacked bodies, to run for her life to another town, to another village. I had a guy from Iran whose father was arrested and tortured so bad that he left with heart problems. His family, he wouldn't convert to Islam, so his family was kicked out into the street. They took everything from him. So his father had to have heart surgery after he was tortured. He had to get his own blood because, in their country, once, you've been excommunicated in a way, you have no rights to any type of services. He had the surgery. He had to get his son out of Iran. So he took a 4-hour bus ride to Turkey. And that's where, and it was really hard for him because this is, a father protecting his son. And he's, doing this harsh bus ride. Takes his son to Turkey, drops him off in a refugee camp. The boy was 17 years old. And he was able to get asylum to America, Florida, but he couldn't speak the language. The next time he saw his father was 14 years later. Not too long after that, his father died. And I asked him, what does that mean to you? He said, I can't get that back. Now, he's telling me this in tears. I can't get it back. His wife, he's from Iran. His wife is from Colombia. They met both as asylees taking the same English class. They communicated through pictures. She was here from Colombia because her family was in politics. It was a political uprising, so her family had to get her out. The next time she saw her family was 12 years later. Her parents died not too long after that. And both of them, they said that's one of the biggest regrets of their life. They said, I just wanted to see my mom. I just wanted to see my dad. Because they were here on asylum, they had to agree they could never go back home. So these are the weight that they come here on first. So they start there with that weight. And then they're in a system where there's no centralized help. Through the city, through the county, no place to go to get one answer. And so now they got to learn the language. Now they got to learn the system on their own from scratch. And so once you hear, now these stories are multiplied. I've even had families from undocumented to documented. And the mom would have to go to the hospital several times because she's like, I had to walk 5 miles to pick my kids up from school because I'm too afraid to drive. She said, I'm afraid all the time. The father, he was like, things like getting a car for you guys is something that's simple. For us, it's everything. It's a fight, and where do we go to get answers? We go to this person, that person. Yes, there's organizations. Yes, there's pro bono attorneys, but why can't there be one place for us to go where we can trust, where we don't feel like if we walk in, there's a target on our back? So these are the things that I'm bringing to these politicians, and I'm asking them, and I'm putting immigration on their platform because they need to hear it. This is an extreme amount of pain that they have to go through, and having fair and affordable application services, not just that's a huge part, because if documentation is the one thing that they have, that paper, to save their life and the life of their families, let's try to ease that burden. Let's not make it so hard and out of reach as far as the expense. We can simplify that process. Immigration reform does not have to be at a federal level. There's a state solution, and then there's a local solution. I just had a town hall. It was a Haitian edition, and it was a room full of Haitians. We had some other immigrants from other countries there as well. And I asked one guy, very meek guy, I said, and asked him privately, and it's always sat in the back of my head for years, because I know how Black people are. If we feel like our rights are taken, we're going to burn the city down. We just have a reaction to civil rights in a way. But I asked, I was asking him, I said, why don't you guys stand up and fight for your rights? Why don't you demand it? He said, and very meekly he told me, he said, because we're trained not to. In our countries, you can't do that. You'll be killed. We can't take the risk of standing up for ourselves and putting a mark on our back. I'm trying to get my mom here. I haven't seen my mom in 5 years. So when you think about what that piece of paper costs for American citizenship, what the cost is. So the cost for immigrants is not that we're in a broken system that doesn't work. That's extremely expensive. But it also means I can never go back home for some of them. It also means if I go back home, I could be killed, or I could be out on the street, or I could be deported and my family is left here behind. So you're talking about levels of freedom and safety that, we don't, as Americans, we don't think about, because we're afforded it every day. We can cut up, but we're not getting kicked out of here. We might get thrown in jail and get back out. But for them, it's life or death. So that's why I think it's so immensely important for these politicians to hear, hold on a second, this is not hard. Mandela said, education is the most powerful weapon which can be used to change the world. So creating a solution at a state and local level, centralize it, train them, and provide oversight, because they're constantly taken advantage of. Because who are they going to complain to? They're not trained to go complain, because their plight is already hard. Their plight is harder because you snatch everything that from a person, their family, their environment, their religion, you put them in a whole new environment. So now we're saying, if you don't get documentation, we're kicking you out of here. They say, okay, where do I go? Figure it out. Okay, well, I went here, they took advantage of me. There was a lady that came to my last town hall. She was Haitian, but the lady that was actually interviewing was from Senegal, West Africa. And she sat, and she wasn't even part of the show. She was just listening in, came with her. And she's on my sofa crying, because she was like, we were talking more about the stories. And she says, my father died. She said, I couldn't bury him. I couldn't go. She said she went to the immigration services, and they looked at the paperwork, no, go home. And she said, I have not been able to get over that. I love my dad. I tried so hard to get him here, but he was denied, and I couldn't even bury him. I hadn't seen him in years, and then he died. That weight is enormous. And that's something that they live with all the time. And I know you can jump in at any time if you have any questions, but I had this another girl from Venezuela. When she turned 18, she got married, because for her, that was her pathway to getting citizenship for her family, because they had fought for years to get citizenship. And when she was at her fiance, I guess to get married, the interview process, they let them go to a room and hug it out, because if she failed that interview, there's no reason for you to be here. She could have walked out of there in handcuffs if she had failed. And where is she going to go to help get the practice for the interview? So the level and the burden that the U.S. puts on the documentation process is enormous, and it's unfair. There's so many human rights violations, there's so many civil rights violations that I feel as if real civil rights leaders, Black people, we've been fighting for our rights for a long time, but is there any room for someone else, for another group of people that is suffering and exceptionally hard, because a lot of immigrants can't get on public assistance? What are you going to do? So there should be a centralized place where they can go, like an immigration center, like maybe through the county where they don't have to send their kid in there because they're undocumented and they're afraid because these children are doing adult situations, by paying rent or, paying bills or translating. There should be an immigration center that's sensitive, at least to, there are resources here in the county. You can't get on public assistance, but there's a food bank here, or there's a clothing drive here. There's assistance for Christmas, here, just to provide a pathway instead of, Americans, stomping, fighting. Yes, we deserve our rights as Americans, especially as Black Americans. Yes, we deserve it. Yes, we fight, but is there any extra fight in us for them?
One of the things that is really crucial, I think recently, the most recent thing I can think of is, of course, we've seen the Haitian migrants on the border of El Paso, whatever they want to call it. And we've seen the treatment of how they were being treated. People being on horses, trying to push them back. And one of the things for me is that I don't know if these stories are heard enough, right? The fact that if I'm a parent, no, I don't care who you are. When you birth a child, there's a certain love there. That irregardless whether you're a good parent or bad parent, there's still love for that child there. And if a person's risking their child's life to flee from someplace, they don't do that for the purpose of just wanting to. I've been to Haiti. I've been to the Dominican Republic. They're beautiful, beautiful islands, beautiful countries, right? Mm-hmm. A person won't just get up and leave Haiti because of the fact that, hey, you know what? I don't want to make my country better. There's a certain pride you have about being from where you're from. Like, there's a certain pride. Even Haitians I know who are in Fort Lauderdale, they still have pride for the country of Haiti. Why is it that we don't hear these stories enough? Why is it that as a country we're not telling these stories enough?
But they're not telling them, and they will tell you, and I would definitely love to invite you out to the next town hall. It's not confirmed, but Senator Donzella James is supposed to sit on the next town hall, and I'm gonna have more diversity of immigrants at that town hall, because the whole purpose is for her to hear that the stories are all the same, the needs are all the same. But the thing that they tell you, they said, we don't have a platform. And I asked, and one of the Venezuelan immigrants, she said, the louder your voice is, meaning me, our Americans, she said, the louder your voice is, the louder our voices. Because there's a lot of immigrants that I've reached out to that's, they were going to come, but then they pull back. Or I'll ask them, I said, what's your story? And they were like, don't want to talk about it. So if, this is what I know. If Americans, and it's interesting because a lot of Americans watch my show, because a lot of them like, oh, I didn't know it was that bad. And so now when they hear the stories and these immigrants are having the opportunity and a platform to do it, there's a level of freedom and confidence that comes with it. And so I believe that they want to hear the stories. Americans, I believe Americans want to hear it. We just haven't really given them a platform, and that's what the Immigrant Stories town halls are designed to, is to open up, is to give them a chance to tell it, what it costs, not just the physical, the monetary costs of the documentation, but what are the costs to have that card, to say that I'm an American citizen. It costs a whole lot more, when you think about like true American heroes, would you sacrifice years of your parents' life to go to another country? Would you sacrifice never going back home to see your family, to see your homeland? Is that worth a citizenship for you somewhere else? So, all I'm asking is Americans to ask themselves that question. What is that citizenship worth? What would you give up? And so when they tell it, you feel it, and they say, and they tell me there's no one in our community that's advocating for us. And that puts a burden, a good burden, on me to every single day, whether I'm getting cussed out by an attorney, where I'm getting flipped off by, who are you? You're not even an immigrant. What do you think you're doing? There's stuff for them out there. Let them, we're already doing that. Who do you think you are? So I catch that from Americans. I catch it from, not so much, I don't catch it from immigrants. What I'm catching sometimes from immigrants is that I don't want to rock the boat.
Right.
That's not the trouble I want to bring to my home. And you have to respect that. because there's undocumented people in their family. They're trying to keep their community safe. So my goal is to talk to and connect with as many politicians so that they can hear it. No, they're in the community. You have a responsibility to hear it. And I have a lot of politicians who, hey, it's not on my platform. Me, that's unacceptable, and I'm going to call you out.
So one of the things that I know you mentioned earlier is that Smart Pathways is actually creating a curriculum.
Correct.
So if people want to know more about the curriculum, how they can go and buy the curriculum, if they can be a part of the curriculum or take the curriculum, how can they do so?
Well, we have not yet rolled the curriculum out because I felt the thing that was most important is to get the stories out and to bring an awareness. I want to roll it out maybe sometime next year. They want to find out, more how to purchase it. It'll be on our website. So I'm not really announcing that part yet because really I want to open up the floor, create a forum where we can talk about immigration as another form of immigration reform at a state and local level. I have to open up that platform because there's so much mistrust between the immigrant community and the American community. There's no sense in trying to roll out and do anything if there's such a disconnect. Let's bring the two together. Let's have politicians not just sit on their behind and say, hey, if you need help, come to our town halls, come here and demand it. You have to understand that their situation is uniquely different than average Americans. They are still a bit afraid, but you also have to know the mindset from the countries that they came from. You don't do that. So for this unique circumstance, it might require politicians and candidates to get off their behinds and go into the community and ask, how can we help? And then they'll tell you, and then it starts building that trust. And so I asked one of the Haitians at the town hall, I said, what would build trust between the immigrant community and the government? He said one word. He said, fairness. He said, I just want to know how. If there's a cost, how much? He said he had hired an attorney, paid thousands of dollars, and he didn't know how to and he told him, I don't know how to do this application. He had to call immigration services. They had to walk him through it. So these are the type of things that...
But he's an attorney working in immigration.
Yes. And I've been cussed out by immigration attorneys. Don't need them. What I've developed is similar to, because I'm a realtor as well. So I do more than help people buy, sell, and invest in properties. They ask me about the schools. They ask me about the taxes. They ask me about credit. They, during the closing process, typically a husband and wife are about to kill each other. Then I'm a counselor, so I wear many hats, and most realtors do, and they understand that. Consultants would, immigration consultants would be the same thing. They could wear many hats as far as understanding the community. Now, think about it like this. Immigration consultant industry is not just for immigrants. So my daughter wants to go to law school, study international law. She speaks Arabic. She wants to go to those countries. Do I want her working with a travel agent, or do I want her working with a consultant that understands how to call the consulate or the embassy, or how to connect with the congressman if something happens? No, I want her to use a consultant. So Americans that travel overseas need immigration help as well, with... if they're going to school, working, sports, journalism, whatever it may be, or maybe even if they're even have a political position over there, they still need immigration help. So these consultant firms do. They're a place where, almost like an H&R Block, where you can walk in and say, hey, I'm trying to go to this country. If my daughter wants to go to a particular country that's maybe moderately dangerous, well, I want a consultant to say, this is what you don't need to do.
Right.
And that's what a lot of Americans, they go overseas and they get locked up for, breaking sort of cultural rules. We think it's, freedom here is not freedom there. And so immigration consultants can, hey, if you're in trouble, here's the number to the consulate, to the embassy. This is your connect. If you're ever in trouble, call me. I'll connect with your, the attorney or the congressman. So it's bigger than just the immigrant part, but it's global. Even people that want to come here the right way, they can go through these consultant firms.
You said something that kind of really caught my attention is that one of the things that we've been lucky to do is build a really good connection with a lot of politicians. And it's something that I think needs to be on everybody's platform. Immigration is something that's not going away, and the more we sweep it under the rug, it seems like the more dirtier it gets. We've seen kids in cages. We've seen people like I said,
Yeah.
being pushed back by horses. And I appreciate you coming on and tell some of those stories, because it does make you really kind of be like, the things that people go through in order to,
Yes.
and not only as an American, just to humanize us a little bit, it causes me to be humble, because I realize that the things that I take for granted, somebody else is willing to sacrifice their life for.
Yeah. Yeah. And the life of their parents. You know, I really want to, stick there, because there's no person that can identify, like you said, a good parent, bad parent is still, that bond is always there. I personally can't imagine not seeing my parents for 12, 14 years. I can't imagine if my dad died and I go to the immigration officers, I'm like, can I go bury my dad? No, go home. No waiver, no. That's hard. I see if there's if they had committed a crime or just some, what's the reason? Well, no, your permit, or, maybe, I can't remember why I may have to ask her again, because I want to be correct in how I say things, but I have to ask her specifically. But she just said that the immigration officer, based on, I think, her paperwork, she couldn't, leave the country. So there's no mercy. You centralize it, you bring these communities together, and then it brings sort of a confidence within the community where they start saying, this is not fair.
Right.
We start holding these politicians who don't have immigration on their platform, they start holding them accountable. Why can't I go bury my dad? Why can't my undocumented neighbor whose daughter was just raped, why can't she go into the police without worried about her mom getting deported? We don't want that anymore. We pay taxes, and they want to be here. And every single one of them said, we don't want the United States to give us anything. We'll work for it. We'll pay our taxes. We'll follow the rules. We just need to know how to do it.
In fact, some of them do pay taxes. Even now.
Absolutely. The undocumented pay taxes too. They pay taxes. One thing you probably may not know, if you're an undocumented person can buy a home, you know what the down payment is? 60%.
Wow.
60%. There was a girl who came here on a student visa. She's also on TPS. She's from Venezuela. Venezuela is another country where the government is completely broken down. But she can't go back home. But she can only work on campus at $7 an hour, which means she can't buy a car. She can't afford a place to live. And she has no other choice. Centralize the immigration process at a state and local level. That is, and I don't know how many politicians, I know you have them on here, and I swear I hope that they're listening. Let's talk about immigration reform at a state and local level. It starts building that confidence with the immigration community so that more of them are more confident in their vote. Now those, there's some immigrants that come here documented, and then because the misinformation of immigration and it's so scattered, become undocumented. Doesn't make any sense. Yes, 2 minutes. Okay. So I'm sorry. Do you have a question?
No, I didn't. One of the things that I'm baffled, because again, as I have people on the show, and I think somebody was working for Agriculture Secretary, running for Agriculture Secretary. He was commissioner. Sorry. He was here the other day, and he was mentioning how there's farmers who hire undocumented immigrants, and OSHA violations go out the window because they can't report them, because they report them and OSHA shows up, they're undocumented. So these people are living in like terrible circumstances, like things that we wouldn't even put our worst enemy in, because the person or they're documented, but the person who they have a visa to work only over here, and that person rips up their visa, it's over with.
It's over.
So I think that this is something that we really have to spend more time talking about, and spend more time actually educating people on, because like you said, Nelson Mandela did say that education is extremely important. Is the most powerful tool we have.
Yes.
And I would even say, even now we were talking about CRT last week, and it's the same thing. If you don't understand the past, and most of these, and it's funny because I was watching somebody on TV the other day they're getting ready to open up a Latin America or Hispanic American museum, kind of like they did the African American Museum, owned by the Smithsonians. And the guy was saying that we have to remember that most Hispanics and most of the people from the Latin culture were here way before we were. They're not immigrants to this country. They were here in this country because Florida, Texas, all that stuff was not an American province.
It was not, yeah.
So we bought it from Mexico, we bought it from Spain. So to remind people of that, and I think that some people in society, when they hear that, their faces will probably turn red, because they want to think that we were the first ones over here, and that's the way it is.
That's the way it is,
right? We're not. Thank you for your time today.
Absolutely.
One more time, if people want to know just more information about your website, I mean, do you guys have a website up and everything?
Yeah, so it's smartpathways.org. You can find out a lot more about what Smart Pathways is doing. I'm actually about to add a little bit more information about our town halls. I'm about to start adding, as immigrants become more comfortable, they can listen to their stories. You hear the stories for themselves. So more importantly, I would love to have anyone that wants to join our town halls. Please come. It's life changing. It's not just informational. I want to catch you here. Right in the heart, right in the gut, and get as many politicians on board. I don't care if they get on board or not, but I want them to hear it.
Right. Thank you for your time today, and I really do appreciate you, Ms. Zane. So we will continue to have that dialogue about immigration, because I think that's something that we as a country don't talk about enough.
Nope.
So thank you for your time, and I want everybody to remember that you can go to smartpathways.org, find out more information about the town halls they're doing, find out more information about people who are in this country, serving this country, and some of them are serving in our military, and some of us haven't yet. So let's find out more about the people who we are trying to discourage from coming over here. We're abusing them when they come over here. Let's learn more, let's hear their stories, and let's support them any way we can. Have a blessed day.